It is not 1935. Ignorance is no longer a defense, and it is no longer an option. The calendar today reads at 2026. And thank God the modern state of Israel has existed for 78 years. It is older than North and South Korea. It is older than Qatar and Kenya and Indonesia and the People's Republic of China and post-Soviet Russia and Singapore and Ukraine. The state of Israel is older than 70% of the countries in the UN. So yes, the people who argue that Israel ought to be eliminated are anti-Semitic, for whatever that's worth. They believe that Israel ought to be destroyed, and to accomplish that purpose, they lie incessantly. And then they spread the biggest lie of all, that global Jewry has bamboozled the population, taken over the institutions, and used its magic mind lasers to control the world. So I want to begin with a story. This is the story of a couple. They're debating over whether or not to have a baby, and everybody, friends and enemies, family, neighbors, they all seem to have an opinion. After all, the couple is young. Who knows whether they'll stay together? So many couples divorce, babies are expensive, the world is a terrible, dangerous place. Well, in spite of all of this, the couple decides to have the baby. And the baby is a miracle. It's a beautiful baby. It's healthy. And soon that baby grows into a toddler and then a teen and then finally an adult. A successful adult. An adult capable of defending himself and his family. An adult capable of innovating and building extraordinary things, a tolerant and decent adult. And that adult has children and grandchildren. Now, remember all those friends and enemies and family and neighbors from way back when, decades ago? The people who argued that the original couple shouldn't have the baby. Now imagine they come along decades later with their grandchildren and their children, people who weren't even around when the baby was born. The baby is now nearly 80 years old. He has a family of his own. And these friends and enemies and family and neighbors, they come along and they say, hey, you know what? Things probably would have been better had that baby never been born. In fact, we should probably kill this adult and his children and his children's children. We didn't like his parents. We think their marriage was flawed. His birth had externalities and costs. The best thing we can do is talk incessantly about how awful it was that he was ever conceived. And as a corollary, we should talk incessantly about ways to jail, maim, or kill him and his descendants. So here's the question. Are these people merely good-hearted folks, or are they now evil-minded trash, arguing over the lives of real human beings who exist in the world? This is the question of anti-Zionism. You may notice that dedicated anti-Zionists talk as if Israel does not exist. They act as though the baby was never born. And then, in the same breath, they say that the adult the baby has become should be extirpated, destroyed, mutilated, left to the predations of horrific enemies who murder and kidnap and rape. I'm hard-pressed to suggest that these anti-Zionists fall into the same category as the people who argued against Zionism in, say, 1920. Those people were wrong, too. They were wrong religiously, because the Bible is quite clear that God promised the Holy Land to the Jewish people. They were wrong ideologically, because it turns out that Jews did require a homeland in order to protect themselves. And they were wrong practically, because that homeland ended up miraculously materializing through the hard work and dedication of hundreds of thousands and millions of people. But those people who opposed Zionism before there was a state of Israel are not in the same category as the people who oppose Zionism now. Let's examine why. The best way to examine why is by looking at the definition of Zionism. So, the usual definition of Zionism that you hear is a belief that the Jews have a right to self-determination in their historic homeland. I'm going to argue that that definition is wrong. And in fact, I'm going to argue the definition was never right. That was never the definition of Zionism. Zionism used to be the argument that Jews ought to be granted the ability to self-determine in their historic homeland. That argument was not truly predicated on some sort of universal right to self-determination. It was predicated on a moral call to action that does not exist for every people at every time. Because here's the thing, there is no such thing as a self-effectuating right to self-determination. Woodrow Wilson tried that and it didn't work. There are thousands of ethnic groups all over the world. Most don't have their own state. It turns out that if you want a state, you have to earn it. You have to show on a moral level that you will become a good and positive state. And most of all, you have to do the work to build the state. You have to be able to defend it yourself. You have to be able to actually create and innovate. Well, Zionism won. The baby was born. And that's why there is a state of Israel today. But Zionism today is not even the same thing that it was in 1920. It's not about some sort of prospective right to self-determination. It's not about whether the couple ought to have the baby. The baby is here. It is 80 years old. There are 10 million people who live in Israel. Israel is a global power economically, militarily, technologically. The question of whether Israel ought to have been born has been answered. It's been answered for 4 generations, and it's been answered in the affirmative by any metric, moral or material. No, when we talk about Zionism today, we're talking about something different. Modern Zionism, Zionism today, is the proposition that the state of Israel, the Jewish state of Israel, ought not be exterminated, and that people ought not do unto Israel what they would not have done unto them. So, no extermination and no double standards. That's the whole thing. That's modern Zionism. Anti-Zionism argues the opposite, that the Jewish state of Israel, a thing that, again, exists in the world today and has 10 million citizens, some 2 million of them Muslim, another 200,000 Christian, should be destroyed. That Israel ought to be treated unlike any other country because Israel is somehow uniquely evil. Now, in order to make that case, anti-Zionists must lie. It is required because, you see, Israel is not, in fact, uniquely evil. In fact, Israel is uniquely good. Israel does more to protect civilian life, including the lives of those who overwhelmingly support the people who want to destroy it, than any other country on planet Earth. Israel protects individual rights. Israel protects private property. Israel innovates and builds and creates and defends. Israel is the greatest ally America has in the world. It is a country that is literally flying side-by-side sorties with the United States right now. Israel is a country that fights on the front lines of the battle for the West, and so the anti-Zionists have to lie. It is required. The anti-Zionists must claim that Israel is an apartheid state, despite the citizenship of 2 million Arab Israelis, by claiming that Israel must somehow destroy itself by granting citizenship to those who openly advocate for its destruction, or by handing statehood to terror entities committed to its extermination. The anti-Zionists must lie that Israel discriminates against Christians and Muslims, despite it being the only state in the Middle East that provides the highest level of rights to both. The anti-Zionists must argue that Israel is an ethno-state, again, ignoring Israel's ethnic diversity, as well as the myriad of other states that are far more ethnically monolithic than Israel, ranging from Japan to Armenia to Poland to South Korea to China to Albania to Egypt to Greece to Chile to Bangladesh to France to Germany, Saudi Arabia to Syria. If you consider that Israel's Jewish population itself is ethnically diverse, that it has Mizrahi Jews and Ashkenazi Jews, Ethiopian Jews and Asian Jews, because here's the thing, you can actually convert into Judaism while you cannot become ethnically Japanese. Israel is less ethnically monolithic than half of the UN's member states. The anti-Zionists must lie about the Israeli Defense Forces, the single most humane military operating on planet Earth right now. I've spent time with IDF soldiers recovering at Tel HaShomer Hospital. This is where young men go after experiencing life-altering, sometimes life-destroying injuries because they were instructed to go house to house in urban combat in areas occupied wholly by fans of Hamas to protect a civilian population that cheered and participated in October 7th. The anti-Zionists must lie about Israeli settlements, claiming that building a bathroom in a historically Jewish area of Judea, a place that's been occupied by Jews for, 3,000 plus years, is somehow a deep and brazen violation of international norms. But somehow, Palestinian authorities murdering Arabs who sell land to Jews, that's perfectly normal. The anti-Zionists must lie about Israel's enemies. They must fly cover for terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Muslim Brotherhood and terror-sponsoring states like Iran. And most of all, the anti-Zionists must lie about Jews, because the only way to convince people that all of these other lies are true is to convince people that they have been bamboozled, that they've been hoodwinked, that they're suffering from a sort of false consciousness. And that false consciousness, they say, can be laid at the feet of the Israel-controlled media, the Zionist-controlled governments, the big, broad conspiracy of cliquish and insular Jews who utilize their peculiar, strange power. And this is where anti-Zionism becomes totally coincident with anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is not just you hate Jews. Anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory about Jewish power in the world. It's a belief that Jews secretly control world events, utilize their nefarious talents to harm others and benefit themselves. It preys on people who believe that their lives are somehow not all they should be because of a conspiratorial force that organizes on Friday nights at the synagogue. Anti-Zionism is a conspiracy theory about Israel. It says that Israel somehow controls world events, that Israel uses its nefarious talents to harm others and benefit itself, that Israel preys on people who don't have lives that they want to have, that Israel controls the media and the banks and foreign governments. So, is there a distinction between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism? There may be a distinction, but there is not really a difference. In reality, anti-Zionism is just sleight of hand. It substitutes the word Zionist for Jew and then makes the exact same argument about Jews that anti-Semites makes. Anti-Zionism merely hides behind the fig leaf that some Jews oppose the existence of the state of Israel, which supposedly shows that anti-Zionism, it can't be anti-Semitic because there are some Jews who believe that, so it's not even anti-Jewish. But here is the thing. It is inherently anti-Jewish to oppose Zionism. Remember the real definition of modern Zionism: the proposition that the Jewish state of Israel ought not be exterminated, that people ought not do unto Israel what they would not have done unto them. Any Jew who doesn't believe that is not a Jew in any real sense. Again, we are not being theoretical anymore. The calendar does not say 1935. By the way, if it did, and if you knew then what we know now about what was about to happen to the Jews of Europe, you'd have been a fool to oppose Zionism. Good-hearted anti-Zionism in 1935 was predicated on ignorance and on hope. But now we know what happens when there is no Jewish state. There are piles of ashes in Europe where thriving communities of Jews used to be, because the rest of the world that now insists that Jews give up their collective self-defense shut their doors to the Jews when the chips were down. It is not 1935. Ignorance is no longer a defense, and it is no longer an option. The calendar today reads at 2026. And thank God the modern state of Israel has existed for 78 years. It is older than North and South Korea. It is older than Qatar and Kenya and Indonesia and the People's Republic of China and post-Soviet Russia and Singapore and Ukraine. The state of Israel is older than 70% of the countries in the UN. So yes, the people who argue that Israel ought to be eliminated are anti-Semitic, for whatever that's worth. They believe that Israel ought to be destroyed, and to accomplish that purpose, they lie incessantly. And then they spread the biggest lie of all, that global Jewry has bamboozled the population, taken over the institutions, and used its magic mind lasers to control the world. But here's the thing. That doesn't really matter very much, because now we're just arguing over semantics and categories. Arguing whether anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism is a purposeless conversation. It is not useful. Here is the thing that matters. Anti-Zionism is evil. It is wrong. It is predicated on lies, and it requires violence to achieve the ends it seeks. But anti-Zionism is something even more than that. It is a symptom of a broader malady that threatens the West wholesale, not just Israel and not just the Jews. There is a reason that radicals of all stripes now march under the banner of the Free Palestine movement. Because if you believe that the systems of the West, like free markets and private property and equal rights under law, checks and balances, free speech, that all of these things are mere guises for power, manipulative tools of the Zionists or the Jews or the rich or whomever you like, you will want to destroy the West. It's more palatable these days to call yourself an anti-Zionist than an anti-American or an anti-Canadian, but it's the same root conspiracy theory and the same envious wickedness that destroys societies from the inside out. Which is why every person who loves the West, who likes individual liberty and property rights, who prefers building and innovation to destruction and tyranny, who understands that Israel's enemies are the same enemies as the enemies of the West, ought to stand against the anti-Zionists, because those anti-Zionists are enemies of the West. And here's the thing. The anti-Zionists will not win. Yes, the anti-Zionists could temporarily win the battle for public opinion. Hatred of Jews always finds new bottles in which to pour its old wine. But Israel won't stop existing. It is stronger than its enemies and stronger than its own internal issues. That baby, born 78 years ago, is no longer a child to be smothered in the crib. It is a regional force, a military and technological powerhouse, a self-confident country capable of launching more unicorn companies per capita than any country on earth, while simultaneously fighting and winning existential war on multiple fronts. In the Bible, in the book of Exodus, the Shemos, the Jews escape Egypt only to be pursued by Pharaoh and his army, and they find themselves trapped between the Red Sea and the Egyptian military. And Moses begins to pray, and God has a response. He says, "Why are you crying out to me? Speak to the Israelites and let them journey forth." What mattered then was courage to move forward, not to be paralyzed by dangers on all sides. And that is still what matters now. So speak up, fight back, and never back down, because as history shows, where there is courage, there is victory. Thanks so much.
If you have a 401k or an IRA, please listen. Gold is at record highs. What many people don't know is this. You can move part of your retirement money legally and without tax penalties into physical gold you actually own. Alpha Omega Gold helps you do this through a gold IRA. Your gold is real. It is stored safely. It is in your name. Learn more at ao.gold/stand. Alpha Omega Gold is our sponsor, and they proudly stand with Israel.